So the only one that's sort of an age restriction is the CPP, okay? But all the other ones can start anytime she wants, okay? A is not correct because while CPP starts at age 60, OAS starts at age 65, you see. And so therefore, that isn't right because she has to wait. And the question really is, which ones will give her a pension the earliest? So OAS, she has to wait till 65, so that's not going to work, okay? C is not correct because lifts have to start later as well. They usually lifts start from 55 onwards. So theoretically, she could possibly, but most lifts really don't start until 65 or over. Double pension plans and everything. Okay. So again, D is not correct because you got LIF and OAS. So therefore, the best answer. Remember, when you're doing multiple choice questions, they're always looking for the best answer. The best answer is CPP, GRIFs, and TFSA, and that is discussed on Chapter 4, Section 4.4, and also 4.6. So we discuss all of these plans in Chapter 4, Section 4.4, and Section 4.6 discusses the various different kinds. So there you'll get information on CPP, RIFs, TFSAs, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's go on to 21. And we've got Danny. Danny's 67, so I'll let you read it for a moment. Okay, so Danny's 67 years old and a recent retiree. He wants to ensure that he has income for life and wants to be protected against inflation. He estimates his life expectancy to be 30 more years. Okay, so he expects to live till 97, basically. And the cost of living is going to increase substantially during this period. So his concern is that he may run out of money, obviously. So because the longevity, he expects to live for 30 more years. He's also concerned about the cost of living, in other words, inflation. So he wants to make sure that he has adequate provisions and everything else for his old age. Which of the following is the most appropriate choice for Danny? In other words, if you have this situation, what's your best bet in terms of what would you recommend for him to buy? And the recommendation here is that, first of all, 50% of his money should go into life annuity. So let me stop there and tell you why. One of the things that we always recommend when we're discussing security and everything else in the old age and everything is that a person has a steady income and does not have to depend on the market. It's not concerned about, doesn't want market fluctuation, of which he wants guarantees. And so therefore the guarantees basically will provide him with a lifetime income so that at the very least he has the three most important things that we as humans need. And what we all need is shelter, food, and clothing. Those are the three things that as human beings we cannot do without. We need to live in some kind of an organization, whatever, a house, whatever, okay, so we have to have a place to live. We need food, obviously, and of course we need clothing. So a life annuity can be set up, 50% of his money could be buy a life annuity that would give him a steady income, let's say $3,000 a month, for the rest of your life, that kind of stuff there. So that way he is assured that a worst case scenario, he's always going to have at the very, very least $3,000. So he's not going to be sleeping on a park bench or something, whatever, in his later years. However, so that solves the first problem in terms of longevity. Okay, in other words, he's going to live for a long time, so longevity. So he'll always have that $3,000. The second part, of course, is he's concerned about the cost of living. So you can take 50% of the money now and put it into some kind of a balanced fund. In balanced funds, then, what they'll do is they go up and down according to market. So he may have an opportunity to increase his growth and everything else because over the long haul, balanced fund actually paid quite well. And so as a result, if he's concerned about living too long and therefore the cost of living going up, he may want to invest some money into a balanced fund, which will keep up with inflation, keep up with interest rates, keep up with the cost of living and all that sort of stuff there, keep up with the market basically, okay? And so therefore, a nice solution to his issue is, look, we're going to give you, let's say, $3,000 a month. minimum, absolute minimum, to lifestyle and everything else, and we're going to take the other 50%, we're going to invest it, and hopefully give you a decent return, so you can keep up with, let's say, the cost of living and so on and so forth. Okay, and so therefore, why A is not correct is because an insured annuity, all it really is that if the person dies, the amount of money it's insured. So therefore, if you've insured your annuity this year for $100,000 and you died, your beneficiary gets $100,000. But it doesn't do anything good for him while he's alive. You see, this is only for the beneficiaries. That's it. The life annuity, if all of his money's in the life annuity, that yes, he has lifetime income, so therefore he's never going to run out of money. The problem is the life annuity will not keep up with inflation. And remember, one of his concerns was the cost of living. And so therefore, the life annuity just won't do that. So if I guaranteed you $3,000 a month forever, it's always going to be $3,000 a month. That's it. So if the cost of living goes up, and therefore your purchasing power is decreased, you're still only going to get $3,000 a month. So while we solve problem one, we haven't solved problem two. That's the issue, okay? And then 50% of his funds in life annuity and 50% of his funds in equity fund. So the first half, obviously, I would agree with. The equity fund is a real problem. See, equities are very, very volatile. So in effect, he could lose all his money. Okay, so he can just simply blow his brains out, basically, because if the market takes a downturn, like what happened 2008, 2009, for example, where the equity market tumbled by 50-60% or something, it's quite possible that all of his money could be completely destroyed. Whereas a balance fund, which is D there, the balance fund is inflation adjusted. Yes, it is. The question on the floor was, is a balance fund adjusted for inflation? The answer is yes. It's adjusted really for interest, inflation, downturns, and all that sort of stuff there. So balance funds are very, very useful. They're conservative, okay? They are conservative. But they're conservative because we want a protection of income base. We want a protection of your funds. So it's a nice, safe place to invest your money. Equity funds, much higher risk. So at that age of 67, the last thing that Danny needs is high risk. What he wants is guarantees. So we put half his money into a guaranteed life annuity. The other half, we put his money into a balance fund. While it's not guaranteed, there is a very strong possibility that he would never lose his money. He will always have some kind of an income in there. That's why it's balanced, because a balanced fund consists of GICs, bonds, and some equities. An equity fund is all equity. It's all stocks, and that's it. And we all know the volatility of the stock market, basically. So you want to have a nice mixture. And so a balanced fund with GICs and bonds and a bit of equity and everything else, so that equity gives you a bit of growth, so to speak. It's a nice, safe place to park your money. That is discussed in Chapter 1. Chapter 1, 3.2. Section 3.2 will discuss the various different funds and everything else that are available. So Chapter 1, Section 3.2 is where you'll get more information about this particular topic. Go to question 22, and we've got Cameron. So Cameron immigrated to Canada 20 years ago and just turned 65 years old. Okay. During his last 20 years, he contributed to the Canada Pension Plan and has contributed the maximum to his RSP account. Cameron asks you what government benefits he will be entitled to when he retires. Which of the following is true? And the answer is he will be entitled to a reduced old age security benefit based upon his residency of 20 years in Canada. So because he is a resident of Canada, and remember that the primary requirement for you to get OAS, besides obviously being 65, you do not get OAS any earlier than age 65, is that you must contribute to this. You must live in Canada for a period of time, no less than 10 years. Okay? You must live in Canada no less than 10 years. It doesn't have to be consecutive. It can be 10 years, spaced out, but basically a total residency is 10 years. In this case here, he's actually lived here for 20 years. So while he hasn't lived here 40, in order to get your full pension, you must live in Canada, be a resident of Canada for 40 years. He's only lived for 20 years, so therefore he's going to get half. Okay, so half. So this year, I believe it's something in the neighborhood of around $556 or something per month. Basically, he will not get 556. He's going to get around 250, 200, 250, let's say, because he's only contributed half that time. Okay? So basically, what we're saying is that OAS is residency driven. He has lived here for more than 10 years, in other words, a total of 20, but he's not lived here for an entire 40 years. And so therefore, he's going to get a reduced benefit, essentially. So A is not correct because he says he will not be entitled to old age security benefit as he has not met the necessary residence. He has met it. He's been in the country for longer than 10 years. So therefore, that's not a problem. B is not correct because he says since he will be getting income from his registered account, he will not be entitled to old age security. Old age security is not an issue. Whether you have money in your from your RSP or your CPP or whatever, that's irrelevant. At age 65, if you have met the residency test, you will get OAS. It all depends on how many years you've contributed. He will not be entitled to OAS security benefits because he's not contributed to OAS. OAS is non-contributory. In other words, you don't pay into it. The OAS actually comes from general revenue. Your CPP, you have to contribute to in order to get CPP. You must contribute to CPP. But OAS is non-contributory. So, for example, if your spouse is a stay-at-home mom or a dad, in other words, they don't work outside the home or anything, but they simply have lived here for at least 10 years, they will get OAS at age 65. So OAS is not a contributory plan like CPP or RSPs and all that. OAS comes from general revenue available to all people that meet the residency status, and that's why D is correct. That is discussed in Chapter 4. Chapter 4 and it's 4.0 is the section where they discuss OAS and all the other sort of security blankets the governments provide for its citizens and everything, or for its residents. Okay, so 22, we're now into 23. And we've got Patrice, so Beatrice and Norman. So I'll give you a moment to read this. Okay, a few years ago, Beatrice gave her son, Norman, the authority to act on her behalf to handle her financial affairs through a power of attorney. So he has power of attorney for wealth, basically, financial affairs. Okay? Today, Norman is meeting with his agent to invest some of Beatrice's money into a segregated fund. When completing the application, they named Beatrice as the contract owner and the annuitant, and Norman as the beneficiary. Norman signs the application on his mother's behalf. After submitting the application to the insurance company, it is returned to the agent for the purpose of making a correction. What did the insurance company return the application? Why did the insurance company return the application for correction? Okay? When you are named as the power of attorney, there are two things that you cannot do. First of all, you cannot name yourself as the beneficiary of the power of attorney, and number two, you cannot you cannot draw a will on behalf of your client. In other words, in this case here, Norman cannot name himself as the beneficiary of his mother's segregated fund, and also Norman will not be able to do a will on behalf of his wife, his mother. Okay, so he cannot do a will, and he cannot name himself as a beneficiary. And so therefore the answer is Norman cannot name himself as a beneficiary. It would be considered a conflict of interest. So therefore Norman cannot change the benefit, cannot name anybody for that matter as beneficiary, but certainly not name himself as beneficiary because he could run in a conflict of interest. So what he cannot do is name himself as a beneficiary. So the contract owner should be Norman, okay? that's not an issue. That's perfectly fine because he does have power of attorney. So that's not an issue. He was given the power, so he can have ownership of the contract. The annuitant should be, the contract annuitant should be Norman. Once again, he could do that. Okay, he could do that because again, the money now technically, because he was given power of attorney, technically the money is his, and so therefore he could name himself as the annuitant. Okay, Beatrice has to sign the application. Not necessarily. She could, but because again he has power of attorney, he can do that. Remember, the power of attorney is a very powerful document. So basically, he can do a lot of stuff basically with the power of attorney. But the one thing he cannot do is do a will on behalf of his mother in this case here, and name himself as the beneficiary of that annuity. Because once again, in both cases, it would be considered a conflict of interest. Okay. I strongly urge you to read that section on power of attorney, which is on section 6.2, okay, chapter 6, and then section 2.1, 6.2.1 is where that information is. There usually is a question on the exam, either the certification or the provincial exam about power of attorneys, because these are very popular vehicles in which to handle people's money who have medical issues, health issues, incompetency issues, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's go to 24, and we've got Evelyn. Okay, Evelyn has the following investments. She has RIF, Registered Retirement Income Fund, in other words, which has $600,000 invested in GIC. So she's invested, her RIF is all invested in GICs. She has a house, $400,000. She has a college for $280,000. She has savings account of $5,000, and she has an outstanding mortgage of only $35,000. Based on the information provided, what can you conclude about Evelyn's situation? Okay, in other words, given this here, your first thought is, okay, what is her objective basically? And the objective here is she is a very low risk person. In other words, she doesn't like risk. Look where she's invested her money. She's got her money in GICs, in her house, in a cottage, in a savings account. She has just a very small mortgage, which she could easily pay off if she wanted to, because she's got a savings account of $5,000. So it's quite easy for her to get rid of that. So really, what we're really saying is that she has a very low risk tolerance, because she's saying, I'm very conservative. I do not want to lose any money whatsoever. So if you notice, she hasn't got her money in any kind of equities of any kind. And so therefore, there's no risk here. Every single investment she's got really no risk whatsoever. Okay, as simple as that. You cannot conclude from what you see there that she's 71. Just because it says RIF doesn't mean that she's 71. Remember, the RIF can start anytime. She could be 55 for all we know. So that's not going to be right. She has adequately saved for her retirement. Once again, we don't know that. Okay. Yes, $600,000 may seem like a lot, but we don't know anything about her lifestyle. She may have a very expensive lifestyle. She likes to travel first class, let's say, different parts of the world. Well, that can be a very expensive lifestyle. She may be driving very expensive cars, having very expensive trips, living in a very expensive area. We don't know that. So we cannot draw that conclusion just because she's got all this money that she has adequate amount of money for her retirement. And she had no need for life insurance. Once again, we don't know that. For all we know, she may have dependents. We don't know that. She may have 5 kids. And this kind of money, leaving this kind of money for the 5 kids, may not be enough money. Okay. Don't forget also that the $600,000 in a RIF, when she dies, that's all taxed. Every dime of it, that's all taxed. Okay. And so therefore, she may not have enough insurance to cover the liability from the taxes for the RIF. Okay. The house, of course, will be tax free, so that's not a problem. But the cottage will probably have a capital gain. She might have bought the cottage for $80,000, and now it's worth $280,000. So she's got a $200,000 capital gain. You see, so once again, we may discover that just because she's got all this money, she may not necessarily have enough life insurance to cover the tax liability or family needs or whatever it is. So based on all of that stuff, all we can conclude from the stuff that we have in front of us right now is that she has a very, very low risk tolerance. In other words, safety of capital for her is very, very important, basically. Okay, that is discussed in Chapter 4 and Section 8.3. So Chapter 4, Section 8.3, we discuss this kind of a situation. Let's go on to 25, and we've got Ronnie. So Ronnie is a new agent. He's going to meet with the client and hopes to have the client invest in the segregated fund contract. She wants to know the client identification requirements under the proceeds of crime, money laundering, and so on and so forth. Okay. What do you tell Ronnie about the identification requirements? If you remember when we discussed this a little bit in the last session, and we will again discuss this quite extensively next week when we talk about ethics and everything. On the ethics module, we do go back and talk about proceeds of crime and money laundering and everything. Is that there are two classifications of income. There's open money, in other words, non-registered money, and registered money. So when a person puts money into a registered fund, then it is what they call an exempt product. So as an exempt product, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do any kind of reporting whatsoever. And that's why it is B is the correct answer. This requirements do not apply when the account is registered. In other words, exempt products are exempt life insurance, in other words, universal life, that's exempt. RSPs, RIPs, LIRAs, LIPs, LRIPs, TFSAs, things of that nature. In other words, any kind of tax sheltered vehicle will be referred to as exempt products. If a person wants to buy one of those, you do not have to report anything like the person gives you $10,000 or more, but they're buying an exempt product. You do not have to report that to FinTrack. So in this case here, there is no need for any kind of identification whatsoever because it is registered money. If it was not exempt money, in other words, if a person says, I want to buy an annuity or I want to buy a GIC or something, and it's not registered money, and it is over $10,000, then you must report that to FinTrack because that could be ill-gotten gain, as they say. And that's why A is not correct. These requirements apply to registered and non-registered money. That's not true. Okay, the requirement to report is only for non-registered money. It is not for registered money, tax sheltered money, basically. C is not correct because it says these requirements do not apply when the account is non-registered. Okay, if they do apply when it's non-registered. In other words, if it is non-registered, you must report anybody giving you over $10,000. Okay, these requirements do not apply to both registered and non-registered accounts when the sum deposit is less than $10,000. Okay, and that is almost correct, but again, it's registered and non-registered. That's the issue here, because it's when you get registered or non-registered, you've got to make up your mind which one is it basically. So that's not quite correct. So the best answer is that registered money, you do not have to apply anything. You do not have to report this. You do not have to have any kind of identification, whatever, for non-registered money. Okay, and that is quite extensively actually discussed. And you should read this because you will definitely get a question on proceeds of crime and money laundering. It's Chapter 6, and it's on Section 2.1. Chapter 6, Section 2.1 is where they discuss this particular situation. Let's go on to 26, and we've got Morgan. So we've got Morgan is retiring next month at 65 years of age. he has over $400,000 in accumulated in defined contribution pension plan offered by his employer. Morgan has sufficient savings to take care of his expenses until he turns 72 years old. He also plans to generate income through his new home business as a consultant. He figures that he will not have to use his retirement funds immediately. In other words, he doesn't need anything from the $400,000. So basically, what would you recommend that he does with the $500,000? Okay, and the recommendation is that, in fact, the only thing he really should do is transfer the funds to a LIRA, okay, a locked-in retirement account, the LIRA, on retirement, and then he can decide upon options by the end of the year he turns 71. In other words, at age 71, as you know, with all registered money, you need to start taking money out on a monthly basis, basically. Okay, and so therefore he's got plenty of time. He's got almost 6 years, basically. Say, okay, I'm going to move my money over to a LIRA. It's going to sit there. Remember, the LIRA is just a deposit account. That's all it is. But it is locked in. In other words, he can't cash this thing up. Remember, it is locked in. And so therefore, he's got 6 years to sort of basically make up his mind what kind of vehicle that he wants to buy. Does he want to buy a life annuity? Does he want to buy a LIF? Does he want to buy a LRIF? In other words, what does he want to do with that? Now, of course, he has to make up his mind by the year he turns age 71. So A is not right because it says transfer the funds to life income and commence withdrawals when he turns 72. No, once you transfer the money to a life income fund, okay, the income starts right away. In other words, within a month. So you can't transfer money and say, oh no, hang on, I don't need the money right now. You will then start to get an income, and the income is minimum or maximum. Basically, is the best you're going to be able to do. So when you move the money over to a LIF, it is a payout annuity, so you have no choice. B is not correct because transfer the funds to an immediate joint and last survivor annuity with his wife named as joint annuitant. No, you can't. Remember I said to you that when we're talking about RRSPs, okay, an owner of the policy and the annuitant can be the same. So there is no such thing as joint last survivor registered money. Non-registered money, you can do that. That's not a problem. You can do a joint last survivor, non-registered money. But registered money it's single life only. So that's not going to work either. C, transfer the funds to a RIF and commence withdrawals at term 72. No, you cannot mix locked-in money, which is the $400,000, with non-locked-in money, which is a RIF. Okay, the two are separate organizations, basically. So you cannot put in locked-in money into a RIF because RIF money is not locked in. So that won't work either. And so the only answer to this is he can put his money into a LIRA, let it sit there, and start taking money out whenever he wants. But at age 71, of course, he must start taking money out whether he likes it or not. So he has to make a decision basically at that point. And that is discussed on Chapter 4, 5.0. Chapter 4, 5.0 is where you will get information about basic LIRAs, RIFs, and all that sort of thing, okay? And we've got 27, and we've got Martha, and this is a little bit long, so once again, I'm going to give you a few moments to read these carefully. So Martha is a resident of British Columbia. She's got $50,000 to invest and wants to donate this investment to her favorite charitable organization upon her death. So when she dies, in other words, she wants the money to go to this charity. Ideally, she would like for her investment to grow. So she wants something obviously that's going to grow significantly to increase the amount donated. However, Martha is hesitant to invest in a volatile fund because she does not want the charity to receive less than $50,000. In other words, the absolute bottom line is she wants to make sure that the charity, at the very least, has $50,000. So while she's interested in substantial growth, okay, she's also saying, I don't want it to be less than 50. So that's my stop loss. That's my bottom line. So she also wants to make sure that this gift does not create additional cost to her estate. In other words, she doesn't want the money to go into the estate, and then that could be subject to taxation and creditors and all that sort of stuff there. Okay, so in other words, she wants to make sure that the money goes directly to a charity when she in fact passes away. So given all that stuff, what option would be the best for Martha? So the best option is she can buy an equity-based segregated fund. Equity, remember, will give her the highest amount of return. It is volatile, but that's why you get a higher amount, because of the volatility and everything else. So it's quite possible that she could go through a real strong period of time where the markets are strong, and she could earn a substantial amount of money by using the equity funds. Okay, so that's number one. With 100% death benefit guarantee, so with 100%, you see, no matter what happens to the market, the charity is assured to receive $50,000. Remember, that was one of her requirements. I want to make absolutely sure that the charity does not get anything less than $50,000. So in that case, then she have to have a death benefit guarantee of 100%. And the third part, so we met first one is high growth, which is the equity. We've met the second requirement, which is no less than $50,000. We did that by insuring it for 100%. And the third thing we've got is leave the charity as the beneficiary. In other words, don't leave the estate as the beneficiary, leave the charity as the beneficiary, and therefore that will give the charity. So in other words, the money will go direct to the charity versus if you leave it to the estate, then it has to be probated. Like I said, it could be subject to taxation, it could be subject to creditors. So the best thing to do is name the charity as the beneficiary. So by doing B, we have actually met all three requirements that she requires, basically. Okay, and that is discussed. The question on is it expensive? The answer is no. It's not really expensive. It's just the way you set it all up, basically. Let's be realistic. The MERs obviously are going to be the management expense ratio will be a little bit higher because it is an equity fund. And equity funds are more volatile. You can always tell how volatile a fund is by looking at the MER, because the volatility means a lot of people have to manage this stuff. So it will be a little bit more expensive, but not that much more. It's not going to be a real drain here of any kind. And remember also, she does have that 100% death benefit guarantee. So worst case scenario, the charity will receive $50,000. Naming the charity as beneficiary, of course, there's no cost at all. So really the only real cost, if you want to look at it from a cost perspective, is that the MERs might be a little bit higher on equity funds because of its volatility versus, let's say, as it says there, balanced fund, for example, is not as volatile. So the MERs are a little bit less. Not a lot, but a little bit less. Versus a money market fund, for example, where the MERs is very small because there's no volatility whatsoever. But the problem with when you're using a money market fund is that the growth is very minimal. Remember, she said, I want growth. And so therefore, I'm prepared to take more risk if I have to. Okay, so therefore, the equity fund is your best bet. So hopefully that helped. The gains created additional cost. Don't forget, the money is going to the beneficiary, directly to the beneficiary here. So it's not part of the estate. That's the issue of the beneficiary. Okay, so this is not an estate issue, basically. So remember, she said she wants to make sure that the gift does not create additional cost to her estate. See, what happens with giving it to a charity, she's going to get a tax receipt. Okay, she's going to get a tax receipt for the $50,000, let's say. So therefore, she actually will have a favor because the tax receipt will be made payable to the estate. So it actually could lower her tax position. It will actually lower the expenses. So by naming the charity as a beneficiary, the charity will then issue a tax receipt, let's say, for $50,000, and so therefore that'll be used against any kind of income. So in actual fact, it will minimize the cost to the estate by having a charitable contribution receipt. That's why you would put money into a charity, for example, and they send you a charitable receipt. It minimizes your taxes. So in actual fact, this works out very, very well. Okay, let's move on and that section is on section 2.1.1. So chapter 2, 1.1 is where they discuss that kind of a thing. Okay. That is 28, and we've got Cheryl. And this is a bit long, so I'm going to give you a few extra moments here to read it. Okay, so let me read it for you. I say there's two parts to this here. Cheryl, a decorated biology professor. She has been working at a local university for the last 20 years, and she earns an annual salary of $130,000. She is not satisfied with her previous financial advisor, so she agreed to meet with the new agent, Scott, to review her defined contribution pension plan and her registered retirement savings plan, which are mostly in GICs and bond funds. So that's where her money has been spent, GICs and bonds. Since the idea of owning money makes her uncomfortable, okay, she doesn't like the idea of owing money to anybody, so it makes her uncomfortable. Cheryl does not have any debt. Wanting to demonstrate his level of expertise to his potential new client, Scott immediately discussed the advantage of RSP contributions to benefit from tax deductions and our current marginal tax rate, MTR. How an RSP converted to a RIF at retirement, the usefulness of investing in TFSAs, and reviewed the management expense ratios on her bond fund. He also showed Cheryl that by accepting a slightly higher standard deviation of balanced fund, she could possibly earn higher returns than with her current investment. At the end of the meeting, Cheryl seemed somewhat frustrated and also confused by all this new information. What type of personal risk is most likely to impact Cheryl's financial plan if not addressed by Scott? So when you look at all of this, obviously Scott wants to impress this client. So out he's telling her about all these wonderful things, all the things that he can do, and so on and so forth for her. So he's really, really impressing her in terms of basically showing off of how brilliant he is and everything. But unfortunately, Cheryl is frustrated. Says, "My God, I'm more confused now than ever. I don't know what to do anymore. This is crazy. I may not want to do anything at all." So what Cheryl is really displaying is her lack of financial literacy. In other words, she's a typical client who really has very, very minimal understanding of the marketplace. So this is not an unusual situation. A great deal of your clients, I can assure you, many of the clients that you will be talking to in your career, most of them will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. So it is incumbent on you to keep it simple, okay? Keep it direct, make sure that you're not flying all over the place. Focus your conversation directly to the consumer needs. And over time, you want to educate your clients, okay? Don't do it all in one day. You'll lose them, you'll get lost, and they will then end up saying, "You know what, I'm so confused, I can't make a decision, come back another day," which basically says, "I'm not buying anything, okay? I'm just not buying anything at all." So in this case here, she is so frustrated, so confused, doesn't know what's going on. And so what she's really saying is, "Look, my level of financial literacy is very, very low, and you have now managed to confuse me even more. Go away," basically, okay? And so that's the issue. So as they say, keeping it simple is a better way of selling something. Don't make the product more complicated. Don't show off how brilliant you are. It isn't going to do you any good, basically, okay? So keep it simple. And this is discussed on Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Section 2.4. We talk about financial literacy for the client, okay? Let's move on to 29. And we've got Tim. So once again, I'll give you a moment to read that on your own. Okay, so Tim has maximized his tax-free savings account. So he has a TFSA, and he's been contributing until this year. Up to now, his total investment gain is $5,000. He decided to withdraw $5,000 on November the 15th to pay for a family trip. He will receive a work bonus of $15,000 in mid-December and intends to use that money to maximize his TFSA contribution. So assuming that the maximum TFSA contribution for next calendar year is $5,500, which of the following statements is true? So before I answer the question, let me very briefly bring you up to date with the rules of TFSA. In a TFSA, you can put in up to $5,500 every single year. So for any of you who started this started in 2009, so the maximum at this point that you could have put in is $52,000. So don't worry about the number, it's not important, okay? The important thing is this. Let's say that you decide that here it is now, November, and you really would like to have a holiday before the Christmas, or maybe a Christmas holiday or whatever. So you would decide you're going to withdraw some money right now. So let's say you decide to take out $2,000. Before the end of the year, you put back that $2,000. Because you put in the money before December 31st, that $2,000 will now be considered over contribution. You see, you've already put in your $5,500 for this year. You took out $2,000. Now you decide to put in that $2,000 again before the end of the year. And therefore, in actual fact, as far as audit was concerned, you have now contributed $7,500. In other words, you have $2,000 overpayment. So if you take out money in the calendar year, what you should do is wait for the next calendar year to put in your new contribution, as well as the contribution money that you took out the year before. So having said all that, the correct answer here is Tim can contribute $10,500 as early as January the 1st of next calendar year. So basically what we're saying is any amounts withdrawn from a TFSA can be recontributed in any year following the year of withdrawal. In other words, the following year. You are not to recontribute in the same year. Therefore, the earliest Tim can recontribute the amount withdrawn is January the 1st of the following calendar year. He does not have to wait a full year for the date of withdrawal. So furthermore, as a new calendar year starts, that year's maximum contribution can be made. So in other words, he can put his $5,500 back in again in January the 1st, along with a new contribution of $5,500. Now, in this case here, he withdrew $5,000. Okay, he withdrew $5,000. So therefore, what we're saying is, do not put in the $5,000 before December 31st of this year. Wait till January the 1st. Then in January 1st, you can put in your $5,000 from last year that you took out, as well as the $5,500 for the new year. And that's where you get, in this example, $10,500. Okay, so A is not correct because it says here Tim can contribute $5,000 in mid-December this year and $5,500 as early as January the 1st. No, that will be, if you did that, that $5,000 will be considered an over contribution. So therefore, A will not work. B will not work. It says since the $5,000 withdrawn represents investment gains, it can be recontributed. But Tim can contribute $5,500 as early as January. It doesn't matter whether it's investment gain or your own money. The point is you took out $5,000, so therefore you cannot recontribute that before the end of the year. You must wait until the following year. D is not correct because Tim can contribute $5,500 as early as January the 1st of next calendar year and $5,000 on November 15th of the same year. No, if you contribute $5,500 plus an additional $5,000 in the same year, okay, then that will be considered, again, over contribution. And so therefore, you have to make sure that you read the fine print, as they always say. So make sure that if you withdraw money, you wait for the following year, basically, to put in your contribution to catch up. It's essentially that is very well explained actually in chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4, and it's in section 7.3. Chapter 4, section 7.3 is where you're going to get that information. Okay. And we are now down to the last question, and question 30. It's a bit long, so again, I'm going to give you a moment to read that, okay? Okay, so what we've got here is Neil contributes to a group RRSP plan offered by his employer. The employer matches the employee's contribution. Neil is a widower and has 2 children ages 2 and 5. He wants to ensure that in the event of his death, he leaves behind a substantial sum for his children. Therefore, Neil chooses to invest in a group segregated fund offered by his employer. His reasoning is that in the event of his death, the death benefit guarantee of the segregated fund will take care of the downturn in the market. Therefore, his children are assured of the guaranteed death benefit. Also, there are no sales charges in a group segregated fund. So sales charges only apply to segregated funds for individual investors. So do you think Neil's reasoning is correct? And the answer is no, because there is no death benefit guarantee offered on a group segregated fund. See, the maturity guarantee and death benefit guarantee are only available on individual policies, not on a group segregated fund. So even though he thinks that by buying this, participating in the group segregated funds, employer segregated fund plan, okay, that he has a maturity guarantee and he has death benefit guarantee, the answer is no. Those are things that you lose by going into a group. You do get the other stuff, lower fees, no switching fees, and so on and so forth, okay? But the 2 big ones, in my mind anyways, the 2 big ones, which is the death benefit guarantee and the maturity guarantee, are lost. And so therefore, his reasoning is not correct. So A is not right because it's no, because sales charges are the same individual and group. Not true. Sales charges will be less for a group plan than an individual. Okay, so the MER, in other words, will be less because, again, we're spreading the cost over a larger amount of people. B is not correct because there are sales charges in group segregated funds, but they are lower than charge. There are no sales charges. There is, remember, there is no sales charge on a group segregated fund. C is not correct because yes, because group segregated funds offer death benefit guarantees, albeit lower amounts. No, there is no death benefit guarantee and no maturity guarantee. Remember, that came up in the previous question, in a group segregated fund. So the maturity and the death benefit guarantee are only available on individual policies, not on a group policy. And that's why D is correct and the other ones are not correct. Okay? And that is discussed on Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Section 8.3. Okay, so Chapter 8, Section 8.3 will give you information about that particular topic. Okay? So I believe that we are now at the end. So now you are ready to write the certification exam. So please review the material that I've given you and everything tonight. The material that we talked about on Wednesday. You may, of course, can always go on the website. As you know, we have the videos, which you can go in and listen to those videos as well about segregated funds. Once you've done that, you can now go in and do your certification exam, and hopefully everything will be well.